Australia. Delighted to be joined this morning by Mark Field from Prof Consulting Group, who is FDA's in-market expert for the region. And Mark also looks after South African region, South African market for us as well. But today is purely focused on Australia. And I believe, Mark, you're going to be looking at sort of the changing landscape for grocery and the grocery market, and sort of the opportunities that presents. So I'm going to hand over to Mark in a second. The presentation is being recorded, and we will send around Mark's slides after the webinar as well. If you've got any questions, you can put them in the chat box, or you can, there'll be some time afterwards, so you can turn off your microphone and have a chat with Mark afterwards if you've got any questions for him. So over to you, Mark.
Mel, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your time and looking forward to sharing some insights on the Australian market. I think, although I'm talking to you today from the UK, I was in Australia up until 4 weeks ago, just come back from 4 weeks over there, spending time in market with clients, but also reviewing to see what the latest retailer strategies look like. And I think it's quite exciting. Since the last update that we did via the FDEA, there's been a number of strategic changes in the market. And some of the ones most noticeable for those of you that maybe haven't been able to keep up with some of the blogs we've been sharing through the platform, is that we've seen the latest trading update come through from both Coles and Woolworths, the two largest retailers in that market, that not only gave us an insight into how the retailers performed during Christmas, but also gave us an insight into the momentum they took into the first 7 weeks trading of the new year. And that's been really positive. So I think that's super interesting as well. The key thing I took from that is that the impact Woolworths had from their supply chain going into Christmas was as severe as the analysts expected it to be, with the loss of sales and customers worried about poor availability, which Woolworths have traded through now and seem to be far better than they were going into that period. But the real standout for me there was this was the first Christmas that Coles went into with both of the automated Ocado DCs operational, and their ability to increase the volume, move more boxes through the distribution centres because of the challenges that their main competitor was facing, really was a standout for me. Not only did it drive sales, but as you started to unpick it, it showed that their supply chain capabilities, when tested at the early days, just post its commissioning, really stood up to the challenges and helped them maximise the opportunity. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And I think that sets them up for the momentum they continue to take into the rest of this trading year. And, as always, the growth of online is particularly important in the Australian market, coming from a low base initially. Both retailers continue to report double-digit online growth. So I think that's exciting as well and creates opportunities. Just before we move into the presentation, what we have also seen as a result of below market expectations on trading from Woolworths is that Woolworths have announced a major restructure. Obviously got the new CEO in the business now. She's come in and made her changes to her leadership team, and there's a number of headcount reductions that have been actioned across the business. So we're beginning to see what that shape starts to look like. And Woolworths have laid down a very firm position that you need to be in the office 3 days a week as a minimum, which has meant a number of people that were working remotely to support the previous Woolworths strategy have left the business. So some real changes in the retail structure now, which will take time to kick in, will take time to reach through to the stores. But I think it just signifies some of the challenges and the change in direction in that market. So let's get into where we are now, having shared that background for those of you, to say, that have not read the blog. So Mel, thanks for the update and the introduction. There's a slide that we always use that will be available into the pack, just to tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about Prof and how we're helping clients in the Australian market and other markets. What I wanted to do was help you understand, as we go into this pack, a little bit about some of our team that are on the ground. So obviously, as I say, I'm talking to you from the UK today, having just come back from Australia. But I wanted to introduce you to a couple of the people on the ground. 40% of our team is still based in Australia, although we continue to expand in other markets. So we've got Sam, who's an ex-category manager for Tesco's. She's been in Australia now for 6 years, based in Perth, and really does help us on that sales strategy and go-to-market strategy for clients that are targeting growth into the Australian market. So as I say, Sam, one of our people on the ground, come out of a great stable here, having worked for Tesco's and now consulting with us for a number of years. And then on the other side of Australia, we've got Tim, based in Queensland, an ex-category manager from Sainsbury's, And Tim's real passion is that national account management service. So as we help clients access and pitch to the Australian retailers, a number of clients say to us, what we need is that ongoing support, that fractional national account manager, to make sure our business continues to grow once we've won a listing. And that's something that gets Tim up every day. That's something he finds inspiring, and that's part of the role he delivers for us. Okay, sorry. So let's have a look at the retail sales background. 4 major retailers driving growth. So those of you that have heard me present previously, now we often talk about there being 2 major retailers and 65% of the market. The dynamics in the Australian market has changed, and it's now being referred to as 4 major retailers that are driving the growth and controlling the market. So you've got Woolworths and Coles about 65%, you've got Aldi and Costco come together. Combine the 4, they're over 80% of the market, all playing an important part, but more importantly, all influencing the direction of the market, the pricing strategies, and how consumers are being given choice. As I say, online growth continues to grow at double digits. Yeah, really helped by the investment in the supply chain. And what we've also seen now is Amazon open their 2 large distribution centres. And whilst they're growing incredibly fast for the Australian market, I don't think yet we're seeing that true impact of Amazon that we're seeing in other countries. So I think for me, Amazon is very much a sleeping giant that's not doing so much sleeping, dare I say, which creates an opportunities for brands that want to go into that market, maybe don't want to go for a retailer's listing at this stage, but to use the Amazon model to help with fulfillment and localized sales. I think is becoming more of a serious play now in that long life food products or health and beauty products. Grocery market continues to grow. The latest estimate is that the market will exceed 140 billion this year, so a significant market by many people's size. And Coles and Woolworths have been recognised as being 2 of the more profitable retailers when you look at it on a global landscape. And the GDP forecast is 1.5%. So, consumers are still finding things tight in the Australian market. The cost of food is still significant. They're not seeing the deflation really reducing prices as they hoped, not necessarily as expected. But I think it's a very competitive landscape now for consumers, but also for retailers. So one of the things that has been concluded since we last gave an update through the FDEA is the ACCC report into the retailer practices. So this is the investigation that's been underway for almost a year, very politically driven to try and ultimately reduce the price of food for consumers and give suppliers a fairer deal. The report came out just over 3 weeks ago. Ultimately, there were 20 recommendations that were made. My view is probably it's not going to deliver the impact that maybe some people feared it would, or some people thought it would. But I think ultimately it's come down into these 5 headings. So it's saying competition is a serious challenge. Price transparency is an area of focus. So the report breaks down what's expected from a price transparency perspective and where can the retailers do better, particularly as you look at the promotional activities and the price now versus the price that it was, the price per quantity, and so on and so forth. So how can they help consumers understand better the real value and the price offer? To work with suppliers on better forecasting. So this is particularly focused on fresh, where it was decided there was an opportunity to give longer forecasting to help producers and growers better control their volume in their harvest. We're already seeing that go up to a year's forecasting now as opposed to the traditional 12-week cycle, as retailers are trying to find different ways of operating in that space. Consumer and promotional activity, closely linked into price transparency also, particularly around promotional activity in store, accuracy of labels, shrinkflation and how that's communicated to customers, and the strength of loyalty programs. Loyalty programs, to get a mention, was really interesting because as a retailer now, somebody pitches to you and you're looking to bring them into your retail media services and sell you ultimately as a food and drink brand some of those tools to help consumers find your products within the stores. Loyalty programs are becoming increasingly powerful in the market and consumers are really chasing the points, particularly at times that are hard. And it's interesting that the report has flagged loyalty programs as being an area that needs to have an in-depth review every 2 years. And then probably not a surprise to any of us, remote Australia, how can that be better supported into the communities, and what does the role of the supermarkets look like in that area, and how do you make sure that consumers get the same benefits there as if you were shopping in the CBD in Melbourne or Sydney, as an example. So I think the fact that this report has been published will reduce a lot of the distraction that the major retailers have been going through, having to appear before senates and so forth, and it will enable them now to put all their energy now into driving the business, driving sales, and actioning some of the recommendations. So I think it's really important it's behind us, because I think that now really gives them a very clear runway as they trade now in towards the Christmas period, which is coming at us very closely. Yeah. So we often talk about which categories are driving growth. So just over a couple of weeks ago, the ABS came out with their report for the apparent food report for Australia. So this is based on the food that is sold through retail. It doesn't reflect food that's sold through food service or institutions. And it's the best estimate that the ABS come out with to say this is where Australians are consuming food. These are the changes in consumption, and ultimately that gives you a different data point to say what categories are driving growth. So what was really interesting from this one here is the continued growth in non-alcoholic beverages. And I think that's really important for this conversation because it's still a fairly new category in Australia. It's still a aisle that is still under evolution because there isn't that depth or breadth of products to fill the category. And I think as such, it's creating an opportunity for a category manager to drive sales by having more product listing. So it's a category as a buyer you want to grow. It's a category as consumers are looking to buy more of as their change in consumption habits around alcohol continues to change. And, we're seeing that reported almost weekly at the moment, how people are drinking less. So I think, that's an interesting call out there that trend continues to grow. And I think that creates a great opportunity. I think, not quite so relevant to this call directly, but I think it does reinforce a worrying trend that's occurring in Australia, is the continued decline in vegetable product consumption, because ultimately that means the health challenges the country is facing through its consumers will continue to be there, and that will drive products in the health and wellness category, because ultimately we're not eating enough fresh produce. So I think, that worrying message there that underlines that says it's not great for the horticulture industry, it's not great for the health of consumers, but actually, if we're eating less fruit and veg, are we going to take more supplements? Are we going to take more enriched food? It's quite likely, because we seem to have forgot the traditional values of everyday cooking. Meat consumption continues to increase, which is particularly interesting, although I would say, and again appreciate it's slightly less relevant to this call, but I think understanding changing consumer habits is really important. Fresh meat consumption increased across each of the major meat types, but actually processed meat started to decline. And that links into a slide that we'll talk about a little bit later about clean eating and how consumers' attitudes are beginning to change. And then cereal and cereal products has started to decline when you look at the trend from 2018. That was particularly called out in the snacking area, where the traditional cereal-based snack bars are being consumed less as consumers move into something that's a bit more exciting, a bit different, and has got a higher level of enrichment. So I think, as we know, snacking continues to be a growth outlook. But what we are seeing is that decline in cereal-based products in that category as consumers look for something a bit more inspirational. So let's jump into the two major retailers here. So what we are seeing is a continued focus on premium brands, because ultimately as consumers are eating out less, they're spending slightly more to have a better quality meal at home and celebrate that occasion. So Coles continue to drive their Coles Finest very hard. And that's a high level of products that they're innovating and launching in the market are coming from that. What I would say is when we walk around the UK supermarkets, and I use Tesco's as probably an example of best in class, the gap between where Coles or Woolworths are on that premium food journey versus where Tesco's are today is significant. And for any of you on the call that are producing products that sit in that premium tier for any of the UK retailers, I'd encourage you to think about what's the opportunity there for the Australian market if you're looking at how you produce your products under a retailer label into that market. Just as an example, you walk around Tesco's, you're seeing the butters, you're seeing the oils, you're seeing the sauces, the condiments. It's not just one or two alongside the core range. What we're seeing is obviously those dedicated fixtures now that are just calling Finest all the way through. And that's ultimately where I think the direction of Coles and Woolworths is going, albeit at a slower pace than we're seeing here. And I think that's exciting, because that creates an opportunity for you to sell premium-based product into that market if it's an area of your focus. Then I think owned or exclusive brands is continuing to grow, particularly in areas such as home care, or particularly in areas such as confectionery, where people are lifting and shifting ranges that are in other markets and offering it to the retailers as a full, complete range. The retailers are putting an exclusive brand around it, which resonates with consumers, and you'll see many categories grow very quickly. So home care, home baking, confectionery, just as examples. So for those of you that have got a portfolio of products you're looking to take into the Australian market, if it isn't necessarily a brand strategy that you want to invest in, having those products listed into the market, the ability to say to the retailer, here's a whole consignment that's got, a number of SKUs that are established and proven in other markets, the opportunity to put that under an exclusive brand might appeal more to you than putting it under a traditional private label. And then anything that relates to health and convenience is absolutely flying in that market at the moment. That's where the growth is. And each of the major retailers are trying to work out what is the next stage of health and what is the next stage of convenience, and how do we link the two together. So I think, the market continues to evolve. It's looking for support domestically and internationally to help win across these key categories. And as I've already talked about, low alcohol continues to be of interest. What we shouldn't forget that the majority of Australian retailers don't sell alcohol within the store. Alcohol sold within, the bottle shop or the independent format. So non-alcohol is an opportunity for the retailers to drive products. As consumers eat less, low alcohol needs to be destined into those bottle shops because of the unique requirements of supply in the Australian market. So just to follow on from the liquor conversation, so two major players in the market. You've got Dan Murphy's, which is very much a price message, which is now owned independently, no longer owned by Woolworths as it was up until a few years ago. And then Coles has still got a liquor business, and they've been running a number of banners: Liquorland, First Choice, and Vintage Cellars. What they've announced recently is that they're going to have the largest transformation they've had in the last 30 years within their liquor business, and they're going to bring everything together under the Liquorland banner. So 984 stores, over $2 billion in sales in 2024, and actually after a flat year last year, 3.8% increase for the first 7 weeks of 2025. And I think, their CEO, Michael, there that's on the picture, is very clear that the work they've done to test their strategy has been effective, and to bring everything under the banner of Liquorland will now be clearer for the customers and clearer for the business. So they're full steam ahead in executing their latest strategy. While I think this is important for people on the call, it's about understanding that strategy to work out how your product pitch best resonates with them, because of the changes their transformation will bring. So I think a huge opportunity for those of you that are looking at that market. But I think at a time of change, it's really critical to understand how's that change in strategy, and how do I need to alter my pitch or my product proposal to best resonate with the buyers when they're going through that transformation. But an exciting time for sure. And then the independent sector. The independent sector continues to thrive in the Australian market. And I think there's a number of standouts or noticeable things since the last update in this area. One, what we have seen is the lead in independence, and I often talk about Harris Farms, which is Sydney-based. We've got Ritchie's, which are Melbourne-based, and we've got Drake's that are based in Adelaide. What we have seen is, while the ACCC investigation has been going on over the last 12 months or so, as we've talked about already, this independent sector, the major players have accelerated their store opening. And in some cases, they've opened stores outside of their core area as they've started to move into new territories because of the changing dynamics of the perception of the big four. So I think that's super exciting as well. And as such, they're continuing to grow. They're continuing to be famous for fresh, but they've identified at the centre of store as a growth opportunity. So consumers are no longer just going there because they've got outstanding fresh produce. They're going in there to do more of their weekly shop. And I think it will be a fair amount of time before we go in there and we buy our laundry powder or our toilet rolls. But I think the ability to go in there and buy great quality canned food, great quality oils, great quality condiments that will go alongside the fresh offer, I think that's beginning to be seen as a growth area. So for those of you that are looking at the market and don't want to go for the value offer of supplying into the major retailers, or maybe even the volume pool that the two major retailers would have on your business, understanding the market, going into the independent sector, selling less units to make more profit per unit sold can be a very effective strategy going into the market and give you a chance to build your supply chain, make sure it's robust, understand that the local conditions better and some of the challenges in supplying the market. And success in many cases is where someone's gone into the independent sector, achieved a price position for their products based on the type of customer, and it's going to be, at a premium into these outlets because of the type of customer that they're serving. Yeah, and then to get invited into the major retailers during their next range review because they've seen how well your product's performing in the independent sector because they feel they're losing sales. So you can either go straight into the major retailers and they will be highly influential about where they position your product from a price perspective in the store, or you can go into the independent sector and take a slightly slower, more strategic approach to the market. But ultimately, I think for some clients with the right products, that can be a really great value opportunity. So I wanted to give a couple of examples of products that are resonating with consumers and how products are slightly changing in the market. So, what we are seeing here is the focus here on organic protein on the left with the beauty custard, products there that are giving you food plus added benefits. We're continuing to see the strength of high protein in the market. We're continuing to see the demand for collagen. Those nutrients really resonate with Australians, and we're beginning to see more of the narrative coming into the market now around a low carb. So the picture there for me is obviously a peanut butter based product. Yeah. So we're beginning to see that coming, and then the independent sector we were just talking about, we're seeing them start to move into private label as their volumes get to that point that they feel they can justify it and differentiate. But they are then looking for suppliers that have got less minimum order quantity demands than those supplying the Coles or Woolworths because the independent sector hasn't got that volume. So again, an opportunity there can be for that premium sector to say, actually, we could put your volume into our facilities and make the numbers add up, and then start to develop a private label strategy that takes you into that space for a more premium, more foodie focused product. And so some more examples here of some of the trends that are driving it. So we're seeing a lot of food being designed now that links into the gym junkie. So I've been to the gym, what am I going to have that's going to aid my recovery? We're seeing a lot more food across the store, focus in that area and talk to customers about that link to the gym and link to the food. So I think that's really interesting, and that's resonating very well in the Australian market because ultimately they understand protein and they're seeing that as being a link back through. So you've got the retailers' brands, you've got the branded play in that space, but that's becoming more popular across chilled, across frozen, and across ambient. Then in the middle there, you've got the continued focus around no added sugar. So obviously in the growth there in the ice cream category, new products launched recently, no added sugar. Again, that's resonating well in that market. And then products that you've probably seen at trade shows as you travelled, as I've had, alternative snacking products. So products that we talked earlier about the data saying that cereal-based snacking is becoming less. Freeze-dried products here, different for the consumer, different sensory experience, different nutrition, and actually look really, really exciting. So it's how that all changes to say we want convenience, we want health. What does that mean? And it's becoming far broader now across the store, rather than just the traditional health aisle that we're all aware of. But I also wanted to share some things that haven't reached the Australian market yet, because if I was, listening to the call thinking, okay, how do I go into the Australian market? What can I do that's different? What can I take from global trends? We just use the approach that M&S have taken this year. And if we talk around the growth and demand for mushrooms, the growth around the narrative for brain functionality and good brain health and good gut health, that's becoming a lot more popular in the UK market, as I'm sure we all know, and creating products there that take you on a habit as opposed to just having a meal. So the M&S one, here's a shot for the morning, here's a shot for the afternoon. How do we take that concept into the Australian market and say, here's something that's better for consumers, and we've designed it so you take them, once or twice a day. The independent verification from Q to give more confidence behind the products. Again, we're not seeing this approach widely in the Australian market as yet, And I think independent verification, habit forming products and products that are better for you starts to become the next phase of health and wellness in the Australian market. For those of you that have brands or thinking about private label innovation, I think there's some levers there that are really growing in that space. It could be exciting. We've talked about high protein, we've talked about collagen. Yet what we're not seeing yet is that real focus on fiber. And when you talk to many of the nutritionists, fiber is going to be the next big play in food with functionality. So it's becoming more popular around us here. Again, it's not a big play yet in Australia, but I think the ability to offer products that have got that high fiber or fiber call out would start to put you at the front of the next trend that's coming through. And then I was talking at the beginning of the call around the slight decline in processed meats. And I think as I look at the data and then look at the work M&S are doing at the moment around, single ingredients or reducing ultra processed foods, I think in the not too distant future, that trend will start to reach the Australian market. And it will be how will retailers work with brand owners to decide, okay, what is ultra processed food and what is our response to that consumer concern to offer products that are in that space. Now, I'm not sure they're going to go for the cornflake one ingredient the same way that M&S have, because there's a view on both sides around fortification versus non-fortification, but ultimately consumption of ultra processed foods continues to be a global concern across consumer groups and is seen as a trend. So the question is, how will the Australian market respond to that? And as food and drink brands, what products can you offer that can be a solution to that problem that creates new space for you? So I didn't want to talk just about products. I wanted to talk about the trends that are behind the products and the opportunities I think that starts to create in the Australian market. And then market dynamics, what we are seeing is a range rationalisation programme across at least Coles at the moment, where they're targeting 16%. And when this was announced recently, people thought that this is very unusual, but actually when you look back through the retailer's playbook, it's not unusual. It's a regular part of best practice retailing. What it means is that they will use a customer focused lens to reduce those products that are not selling enough products through. So bring simplicity back into the stores. I think it will probably enable them to have more robust conversations with those suppliers that make the cut and continue to be listed. So that will enhance profitability. I think that's good, as well as driving some efficiency through the supply chain. But I think when that settles and you go through that range rationalisation programme, which should take about 12 months from start to finish, what you've then got is more available space on the shelf because you've opened up your range to say, okay, what innovation do we need to bring in? And what innovation do we want to bring in that's different, rather than having 20 versions of a brown sauce or 20 versions of baked beans or similar examples. So I think at the moment it's good retailing practice, but I think as you start to looking at your export opportunities for Australia, I think the range rationalisation programme, because you're not on the shelf today, creates an opportunity for you tomorrow. What we are also seeing through the retailers' own platforms is the ability to have products listed online also. So a different way of reaching consumers, less complex than putting the products into the store, but a consideration for those of you that have maybe got smaller up and coming brands that are looking to reach the Australian market, but a bit cautious about the volume demands that the market could take. The growth of Amazon, definitely becoming more of a conversation now with clients looking at the Australian market to say, should it be a retail play or should it be an online play? Because in many cases you can turn the online tap on quicker, and it gives you some data to start launching your products into that market before you wait for that retailer listing and the range of view dates. What we are also seeing though is, because the Australian market has been quite challenging over the last 12 to 18 months at least, that local brands are starting to be quite vocal about them struggling to be profitable in the market because of their cost of production versus the retailer margin expectations. Appreciate there's a significant distance to transport products from the UK to Australia, but what we do have here, I believe in many cases, is access to the volume that helps you lower your cost of production because you're supplying into the major retailers here and you've got velocity of production and sales through your facility that enables you then to take turnkey innovation into export markets, as opposed to being a brand in Sydney or Melbourne that you create a great product, but then it's very expensive to bring to market because you haven't got the volume to make it efficient. So I think, whilst it's very challenging locally, I think that opens up opportunities here for brands to be innovative because your local competition is becoming a bit less. And then the retail media focus. So it's definitely a driver in the Australian market now around how, when you get a product listed, how you will invest in retail media sales and how you will best resonate with the customers to help them find your product. We're not to the extent that we're seeing in the UK at the minute, where you walk around and you've got the TVs, you've got the digital displays, and so on and so forth. But you've got to expect that to come, and as such, that comes with significant investment from the brand owners. It creates significant opportunity to be disruptive in store. Up at the retail media event in London just over a fortnight ago, some of the technology that was available there for brand owners to link products and retail media together, all that space is evolving at pace in Australia. And I think having a strategy around that through understanding what's available versus where the market is going enables you to be more effective in that market for sure. So just to really start to summarise now on how to win, understanding the role of each retailer and where your target customer shops through market insights is critical. It's very clear in the Australian market that the customer journey is different. And if you just go into one particular retailer, you're not necessarily going to resonate with your target customer. So understanding who your target customer is, what their shopping behavior is, are they buying your products online, or are they buying similar products online, or are they buying it through traditional bricks and mortar stores, and which store types are they using, enables you there to be more targeted in your approach to that retail channel, so you can resonate with the customers and ultimately solve that problem that they're looking to address. Understanding your competition through category analysis is becoming more important every time we speak to clients, because the benchmark is raising incredibly, and the retailers are really focused now on the differentiation across the offer. And I think it's really important for you to be able to pitch properly into these markets, so you understand who you're competing against and what key messages they've got, or what products they are offering that are resonating and working well in that market. Ensuring a robust approach to the global supply chain is critical. It's about finding the right partner in the country for distribution or for storage to make sure that you've got that and you can meet the sales coming through. We had an example very recently. A client came to us, they'd been told their products were going to be delisted, and they were using a field service provider to go into stores and do their replenishment for them. Actually, as we unpicked that for them, their team was going in on a Wednesday morning. Their competition, who was actually selling really well, their team were going in on Wednesday afternoon. And as you overpick it, the Wednesday afternoon team were overfacing our clients' products. So it's really about making sure that you've got the right supply chain and the right compliance and the right controls in place, so you know where your product is, how your product's performing, and that you've got it there set up for sales before the retailer phones you and says, hey, I'm really sorry, we're going to take your product out because it's not performing. So that in-market expertise to underpin that supply chain, I think, is critical today for the reasons I've just talked about. The strength of the loyalty programs and the e-commerce trends, it's a significant opportunity in the market. Similar way to we're seeing in the UK, I think, in saying, actually, okay, what can I use to make that work for me? And how can I use those programs and those tools to drive my brand in the market? I think that's a key consideration also. Differentiating through innovation and health-focused product. I think the market is definitely moving away from a Me Too product, as we've talked about with the range rationalization exercise, and now they're looking for things that are that next gen of innovation, where you're looking for something that's slightly different. So premium foods, food with functionality. We are seeing internationally now, the growth in the weight loss diets and how that's changing food types and consumers' buying habits. Whilst the weight loss drug market, is significant in Australia, we're not seeing that yet reflected in food. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity to look at what's happening in international markets, where's that gap and how does that overlay, and see if your product can fill that gap and fill that need. And as we said, the use of fractional sales team, distributions and agents to make sure your products are really resonating in that market. We've kept the majority of this conversation very much around online and grocery retail. What is super exciting in the Australian market at the moment is the pharmacy channel, because it's undergone some M&A activity, it's undergone some acquisitional activity. And if we look at what's happening in the UK, we use Holland and Barrett as an example. The pharmacy chains in Australia are very traditional in approach at the moment. They're not really into that food offer. They're not into that meal deal offer. They're not into that wellness food offer anywhere near the same as we're seeing in other markets. And I think that's a market for those of you that operate in that space is definitely worth keeping close to and understanding, because I think if they get halfway from where they are now to where Holland and Barrett are today, that's a significant opportunity for companies who've got the right products and the right customer offer. If they get further than that, then obviously there's a greater win in there. But that's a market that's changing incredibly at the moment. There's a lot of investment behind that, both in supply chain, in store acquisitions, but also driving innovation as well. So in summary, I think the retail market continues to have a promising growth outlook. I think it is becoming more complex, but I think there's some things that have been settled now, as we've talked about on the call, which means they can just do good retailing now going in towards the end of the year. I think we continue to see growth in categories such as world food or international foods, where retailers now are talking more about the country of food and grouping it together. So I think understanding the market to say, where does your product best fit versus where does your customers shop for those type of products, is really key to understanding your success. I think a tailored approach, understanding the consumer needs and the retailer demands, which part of the store you want to be in, what product you're looking to solve, and where does your customer shop, as I said, really important. Innovation is driving the market. We could give you a presentation on the value end of the market, but I think that your chances of success in that space are really limited because of the commercial numbers behind that. But focusing on innovation, premium private label offers, or bringing a brand into that delivers that premium product experience, they're the ones that are driving a competitive advantage in today's market. And I say, in summary, it's about understanding that target market. Where do you want to be? Which retailer, which category, which consumer are you looking to target? Absolutely critical to succeed in the Australian market. So I think there's lots of opportunities, but I think understanding the market is the key to win, rather than just trying to push a product into the market because it's Australia and we think they will buy it. There's a number of international marketing organisations now that are increasing their presence at trade shows in Australia because they're seeing the opportunity as well, particularly around the consumer demand for premium product foods and the cuisines that are on offer. So a big market, but becoming increasingly competitive. And there's our details at the end if anyone would like to follow up. Mel, that's the end of the slides, Mel.
Thanks so much, Mark. I don't know if you just want to stop sharing your screen, and then we do actually have a question in the chat box. It was from Gareth. He was referring to when you were talking about the opportunities for no alcohol, if that actually includes sort of the wider soft drinks, adult soft drinks, etc.
Yes, I think it's all linked in together. I think, what we have got is a market, and Gareth, thank you for the question. What we have got is a market that has been very focused on the Schweppes, the Pepsi Cola and the Coca-Cola. And what we are now seeing is innovation coming into that area. So one of the great success stories in Australia over recent years will be Fever Tree, where initially they went in supply in the UK. Now they've gone for contract manufacturing locally because of the demand in the market and so forth. But I think that as consumers' habits are changing around alcohol consumption, we're either looking for better quality mixes to go with better quality gins and spirits because we're drinking slightly less but looking for a better experience, or we're looking for an alternative to the traditional drinks that we would have consumed. And I think absolutely, and we're doing a bit of work in that space, Gareth, for sure. And I think it's understanding where does your product sit and where can you be most successful. But the demand and the interest is definitely there. And we're not seeing a high level of innovation within the country in that space because of some of the commercial realities behind it. So it would feel a good export opportunity for the right product.
In terms of just wondering where that actually sits on the shelf in the store. So is there a no low alcohol section within the traditional retailers, or how's that work?
So it's a no alcohol section.
Yeah.
Not low, but there's a no alcohol section within the major retailers, and then you go into the bottle shops, which is a significant part of the drinks landscape over there, and they've got no alcohol and low alcohol ranges. So we're beginning to see more choice. We did a lot of work well, probably 2 years ago now, for an investor group that wanted to get in that space. And, the summary behind it was the products that were available in Australia were really poor quality. So, it's a bit like we've seen with plant-based. You go lots of poor quality products to get in there and give customer choice, and, brands come and go. What we're now seeing is that wave 2 or wave 3, where we're seeing some really good products now coming in there because the consumer demand is there, the category manager understands it, and they're looking for great products that will be there consistently. And then you start buying them because they just taste great, as opposed to I'm buying them because I needed a low alcohol option. And it continues then to fuel that habit. So we are definitely now seeing some really good quality wines in that no alcohol space. We're seeing some really good beer in that space as well now, compared to what we have seen previously. And we're seeing some great mixes coming into that space now, because people are looking for botanicals and flavors that they wouldn't have looked for before, because they were so fixed on the Cokes, the Pepsis, and so forth. So a very dynamic market, really interesting. And I think it comes down to, is it a retailer play, and what does that look like? And can you be premium enough if you go into a Coles or Woolworths, versus if I want to go into the liquor business, who's going to carry my brand and do it justice in that space? Or is it more into the HoReCa sector through food service?
Has anybody else got any questions for Mark while he's on? If you just want to unmute yourself and ask away. Paul, over to you.
Yes. Hey, Mark. Paul from Tokyo. Thanks for your presentation.
Hi, Paul.
Is there any mistakes that you see foreign brands maybe continually make from time to time, and that mistake is, uniquely Australian? For example, launching in Woolworths and not Coles, thinking that will be enough. Is there sort of a mistake that foreign brands seem to get wrong?
I think the one that resonates with me very strongly, Paul, is that people drop a product into a distributor and think that they've achieved success, because that distributor by nature has got a wide portfolio of products. And if you're in there pitching to a retailer, if the first one doesn't resonate with the buyer quickly, that goes back in the old briefcase and the next one gets longer. So I think, success isn't just finding a distributor. It's, if you're going to have a distributor model, what are the KPIs? What are the joint responsibilities? How do you as a brand owner have some connectivity with the retailer? Maybe even having that approved supplier number, so that you really do know, you really are in control of your business. And I think that's where we're seeing the growth now for that fractional sales role. It's an extension of your team, where you're not covering the overheads day in, day out. You've got 2 or 3 days a month equivalent, because that's all you need. But you're getting paid by the retailer. You've got that relationship. You're getting the category insights. Whereas a distributor, for them to create value, and not saying all distributors are the same, but in some cases, the more data the distributor holds on to, become king of their own castle, and not necessarily a strategic partner for you. So I think if you're going to use a distributor, picking the right one, I think, is absolutely key, Paul, for sure. And I think then understanding which retailer has got momentum to decide where should you put your innovation. And I think for me, just to finish, it's always that conversation around, if I go into the independent sector and sell less units but position my brand in a particular way, is that the best long-term strategy? Because ultimately I can sell more products eventually at the right margin because of how I've launched a brand. Or I need to chase the volume very quickly. I need to get into one of the majors, but I know that I'm going to take a hit on where my brand pricing should be, but I'm going to get the velocity, but I'm going to get less units per item sold. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome, Paul.
Anybody else have any questions?
Hi, sorry. Mark, just a quick question. Obviously, just following on a little bit from Paul's question, to be honest with you. When you do work with distributors and with retailers in terms of it, and you enter maybe a national kind of supermarket chain like Coles or Woolies or anything like that, do they work in terms of divisions, i.e. like a north, south, east and west, or do you generally have national coverage when you do enter into that kind of supermarket retail chain?
Yeah, so it's national coverage now, Rob. So, you would deal with the national buying office. It's normally national pricing. And they've definitely taken away that simplicity. If you went into the independent sector, that can get a bit more complex depending how far down the chain you go. But if you go for a Coles, a Woolworths, a Costco or an Aldi, it's very much a national supply chain. And then you can manage that from a national team or national person rather than having to have multiple people in the country. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Any more? No, I think we might have come to the end of the questions. But thank you, Mark. That was brilliant. It was really, really insightful. And we're really pleased that Mark's going to be joining us at the FDEA Summer Network Forum on the 4th of June, where he'll be talking things more South Africa in a formal presentation there. But he will be obviously available to meet you there as well to talk Australia if you want to continue the conversation and find out a bit more about the opportunity for your products and how Mark can help you as well. Yeah, so I think, as I said, the webinar has been recorded, so I will send it round along with all the slides. But if you do have any questions for Mark, just please do email him and he'll come back to you, or meet him in June at our event in London on the 4th of June. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mel. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mark. Cheers now.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.